An Honorable Profession is brought to you by OpenCounter.com. OpenCounter builds tools for local governments to deliver permits and licenses online. Their portals make complex permitting simple, which lowers transaction costs, increases transparency, and empowers economic development. Check out OpenCounter.com to see what they can do for your community. Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm your host, Ryan Coonerty. As you probably know by now, An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an amazing organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. I've been a New Deal leader for years, both when I was mayor of Santa Cruz and now as a Santa Cruz County supervisor. If you're quarantining at home right now with nothing to do, I hope you'll check out some of our past episodes with guests like Washington State Lieutenant Governor Cyrus Habib, Georgia Senator Jen Jordan, Albuquerque Mayor and Metallica aficionado Tim Keller, and so many more. As always, you can find us at newdealleaders.org or wherever podcasts are found. Today, I'm talking to a former New Dealer who has found himself with one of the most daunting jobs in this crisis: mobilizing 40 million Americans to help each other in the midst of a pandemic. Josh Fryday is a former mayor of Nevada who was tapped by Governor Gavin Newsom to be the chief service officer for the state of California. It was a big job before coronavirus, but now he's ensuring a lifeline between homebound seniors and necessary services. I think his story and his vision for public service is one we all need to hear right now. Josh Fryday, welcome to An Honorable Profession. It's great to talk to you, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So I was just telling you that I think you have one of the most daunting jobs in America right now, which is how to mobilize 40 million Californians to help each other in a time of crisis and do it safely. Can you talk a little bit about the efforts that your office has undertaken with the spread of the coronavirus?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is daunting, but I think what it's also been is inspiring to see how so many people, including everyone who has made the effort to stay at home and be safe, has really embarked in this collective spirit during this time. So while we have big challenges we need to try to accomplish and work through, it's also been an inspiring time to see how communities have come together and people have really stood up for each other. So I'm very grateful to be in the position I am during this time. But we've, right from the very beginning, we realized of this crisis that there were going to be many people who were going to be isolated and left at home and potentially cut off from their community as a result, and scared and might not have access to supplies. So we launched right away a neighbor-to-neighbor campaign, calling on everyone in California to check on their neighbors, to call their neighbors and make sure that they had what they needed. And we partnered with Nextdoor, which is a platform that reaches over 22,000 neighborhoods, and we launched a campaign and initiative to have people check on each other. It's a simple ask, but in a time like this, it was incredibly important and meaningful. And we heard stories of people, older Californians who did not have food, were running out of supplies, and because of the neighbor program, were able to get what they needed with that helping hand. So again, the challenges have been large, but it's been also inspiring to see how Californians have come together.
And I encourage people to check out Californians for All, and you can see this map in action, and it just makes a ton of sense once you see it, but it's one of those things that took a crisis to really merge government and the private and then just community groups together. Can you also talk about the creation of the Health Corps and how that's going?
Sure. So the governor created the Health Corps. We launched it to call on those with any sort of health background to step up and sign up with Health Corps to be ready to mobilize in case there was a need for a surge. The numbers were staggering. I think it was last time I saw it was close to 90,000 people had signed up for Health Corps, which is just an incredible feedback and again, an example of how people have really answered the call to serve during this time. So in addition to Health Corps, some of the other things we've been doing, we launched, as you just mentioned, Californians for All, which is this new initiative to engage all Californians in taking action at some level, and that could be done at home. So for people who feel like they want to stay safe and stay at home, there's things we're asking people to do, like be a 211 call operator, or check on your neighbor, or make facial coverings that you can donate. And then for those who are comfortable leaving the house, there's safe ways to volunteer, whether it's at food banks or giving blood or working at a shelter. There's also safe ways that we're calling on people to step up and join us at Californians for All, and then we're working with local partners around the state to make the connections so people can make a difference. So we've tried to launch several initiatives to really meet the moment and meet the most important needs of our state and of our communities, and Health Corps is certainly one of them, as we know this is a public health crisis. And then Californians for All is playing a crucial role in helping the food banks across the state, which are seeing unprecedented demand, receive the personnel capacity that they need to operate. One of the things that we saw right after the crisis started was a lot of organizations who rely on volunteers, like food banks, saw a dramatic drop in their volunteer force, largely because, and it makes sense, they relied a lot on their volunteers were seniors, were older Californians. And with the initial stay-at-home order, because of the nature of this crisis, a lot of people were asked to stay at home, and so were no longer able to volunteer, and that led to some really critical needs being left unmet, like at food banks. So we're trying to fill those gaps and asking all Californians to step up in a big way as we get through this.
And how do you manage, I mean, one of the challenges of this crisis is sort of the day-to-day demands and the changing nature of our healthcare statistics and the stay-at-home orders, with developing longer-term systems, and with so much need in such a large state. How do you identify where you're going to put your time and energy and build something that's sustainable?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think that's the critical part of this is what you had mentioned earlier, which is making sure that we're working very closely with organizations on the ground and communities around the state. So that we're actually meeting community needs and then doing it with many of the infrastructures that existed already. However, there's brand new needs that have arisen as a result of this crisis, and so the food banks is a great example of that. And so what we've had to do is essentially think about what are the most vulnerable populations in our state, and then what are the most vulnerable communities that need support, and then how do we leverage state resources to meet those needs. So, for example, with the food banks, when we saw the dramatic decrease in volunteers, we initially sent in the California Guard to provide support there, and then the California Conservation Corps, and then we're soon going to be sending in AmeriCorps disaster team members to provide capacity support to manage large swaths of volunteers and a volunteer force. And it does take a lot of structure. It takes a lot of management, but that's what the state is here to do, and it's really about prioritizing the most vulnerable communities and making sure that they have what they need.
Yeah, and I think one of the more interesting things from my perspective in California is, the volunteerism and service at the state level has always been a value that people have. But this governor and you have really made it central to the response and recovery. What's it like sort of working with the governor in the midst of a crisis when there are so much competition for his time and attention in order to elevate the role of volunteers as a part of the crisis response?
Yeah, sure. So it's a great question, and I'm very lucky and very fortunate that I get to be in this position as Chief Service Officer for the state for a governor that cares so deeply about service and volunteerism, and it's just in his blood. It's second nature to him. He really believes that solutions and how we're going to get through our biggest challenges is not going to come from Sacramento. It's not going to come from government necessarily. It's going to come from all of us stepping up and helping each other. And so he just innately believes and is passionate about the power of service and the power of volunteerism, which makes my job easier in terms of getting making it a priority. So I'm very fortunate for that. But we also understand that we have some. There's a cultural issue. We have to. People aren't used to being, I think, asked by their leaders to step up, and they're in big ways, and think about how do they serve more meaningfully. It's not something that I would argue for a couple of generations, it's been the norm. And I think Governor Newsom is breaking that norm and saying to all of us that if we're going to tackle our biggest challenges, today it's COVID, tomorrow may be climate change, homelessness, whatever it may be, it's going to require all of us stepping up in a big way and all of us doing something meaningful to help each other. And that's something that he believes in, and I think we're seeing that play out with the priority that he's placed on it during this crisis.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to get your insights. It's hard in the middle of a crisis to sort of ask these longer term questions, but you're in just the right place, which is I was just on a conference call with some other leaders and Pete Buttigieg, and he was talking about the importance of reestablishing national service as a way to both address the country's problems, as you mentioned, but also rebuild partisan divides, reduce inequities in our country and our communities. What do you see as the future of community service or national service, and how do you think California might be a model for other places going forward?
Yeah, and I'm glad that Mayor Pete is still talking about national service. He's something I know he's passionate about. I've known him since we were in the Navy, and I know he's always been talking about this, and it's because it's I think for those in our generation post 9/11, we recognize that we need to be asking people to step up and serve in new ways and in broader ways when especially when we have a crisis, but not only when there's a crisis. That a democracy only works when people trust each other and people feel connected to each other. And my experience in the military is that there's no better way to connect than having a common mission when you're put together with people from all different backgrounds and beliefs, and you only have one thing to do, which is accomplish a mission together, and that breaks down all barriers. And so if we can create that kind of opportunity for more people, we have the ability to rebuild trust in communities. We have the ability to bridge some divides that I think we're seeing in a very polarized country right now. And we also have the ability to solve our major problems. Like I said, whether it's climate change or homelessness or getting through the COVID crisis. So I think that we're actually in a generational moment right now for service where there's, even before this crisis, I had been saying, and our office had been talking about the importance of calling on all 40 million Californians to tackle our biggest problems, and really needing everyone in the game. And now we're in a crisis where literally every single person is affected by it. And so it's easy to see and recognize that we are all in this together, and there's also something that all of us can do, whether it's in this particular crisis, it's staying home, or it's working at a food bank, or it's giving blood, or it's being a 2-on-1 operator, or it's working at a shelter. There's a variety of things you can do. This crisis demonstrates that. But the reality is that in our country and in a democracy, that can't happen only during a crisis. We need everybody involved and engaged all the time. And I think people are going to recognize that differently coming out of this crisis. And so we do have an opportunity to reinvigorate national service. I think there's some really exciting proposals we're seeing in Congress right now around what we could do to expand AmeriCorps. And then I think we should build on the kinds of programs that we've created in California with Governor Newsom's leadership that really promote the idea that we want people to serve. So I'll give one example. We launched shortly before the COVID crisis started a program called Civic Action Fellows, where we are partnering with 8 California universities. And we are saying for those universities, if you get into the university and then you commit to doing a semester or a year of service while you're in the universities will give you academic credit and will provide up to a $10,000 scholarship for each student that does that. So programs like that are a win for everyone because it helps people achieve higher education so that they can go on and fulfill their dreams in their career. It helps communities by having young people serve and solve problems, and it builds communities by having people work together to achieve things. So I think if we can build on programs like that, I think if we can build on the spirit and the collective spirit of service that we've seen in COVID throughout California, and we can realize that if we're going to solve our problems, not just now, but in the future, we need people to serve and we need people to step up. And that's part of what it means to be a Californian. Then I think we're going to be in very good shape.
Yeah. And a big part of it is you need that infrastructure and systems to get people into service or recognize their service. But I like what you're talking about where you need that. There's an expectation and a culture. What can people who are listening to this podcast or leaders at the state and local level around the country do you think, to create a culture of service?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because I actually think in many ways, so the infrastructure is critical for being able to absorb those who want to serve. And I would argue that we haven't invested in that infrastructure as profoundly as we needed to as a country. And hopefully that's starting to change. And certainly Governor Newsom's commitment to this is showing how we can make that change in California. But as important as the infrastructure is, in my opinion, the cultural shift to where people, you're expected to serve. I was part of a national service organization founded by General McChrystal, where he talks about the cultural expectation of service and wanting to get to a point where everyone asks, "Where did you serve?" And that's a question that as veterans, as military veterans, we ask each other. And I say I was in Japan and then I was in Guantanamo, but that should be a question that every Californian asks themselves, which is, where did you serve? And so in order to sort of get to the cultural piece, that's the critical part of that is having leaders, I think, set the expectation. And so I think one of the powerful parts about the Civic Action Fellowship program that I just mentioned is where we have 8 university presidents that launched the program with us, is to have university leaders say to their students, "We expect you to serve, we want you to serve, and if you serve, we're going to help you go to college in the same way that generations of veterans received the GI Bill for their service." And so I think that's an example of how leadership, it's not just political leaders. We need university leaders, we need business leaders saying that they're willing to hire people who have served before, and that they also expect their employees to volunteer and give back if you work at their company. We need local leaders calling on people. So there's really an opportunity for everyone to play a role, I think, up and down the state in helping us change this culture. It's not just going to come from 1 or 2 people. It needs to come across the board.
And how Can you talk about your path to service? You've, as we mentioned, you've served an elective office. Now you're appointed office. Previously, you were in the military. Clearly, there's a path, commitment to service. Can you talk about your path? Like, how do you find yourself where you are today?
Sure. I think I often don't like to talk about myself, but I do think it was instructive for how I got here in this position. I've always had a desire to help out and to want to make a difference somehow. And so I think it started at probably my first real structured service experience was when I was 17 years old. I did a program called Amigos de las Americas, where I went and lived in the Dominican Republic for a summer and did community health work and built latrines and helped build an aqueduct in a small community in the Dominican Republic that had no running water, no electricity. So for a 17-year-old from California, it was quite a culture shock. But it was probably the most informative experience of my life. And one of the things I think that is so powerful about service and helping others and being in challenging experiences like that is you come out of it realizing that there's actually as much personal benefit. And it may sound selfish, but the governor often talks about how the happiest people he sees the happiest people he knows are those who volunteer. And there's a lot of science behind the actual impact of volunteering on someone personally. But the things that I learned in the Dominican Republic at that young age, and the experience of being in a brand new situation and having to work with people that had come from a very different background than I did, was all invaluable. And I got a lot out of that, probably as much or more than I actually gave myself. And so I always felt from there a real need to want to help others, and especially those with less, who are underprivileged. And so I stayed active in college and was involved as a student activist and helped get money for the first time for statewide student housing in California with the UC system, the Student Association there. And then after college, joined a presidential campaign and stayed very involved in different issues in campaigns. And then I decided to go to law school, because I saw a lot of people who were making a big impact at the policy level, and they all seemed to have law degrees, or at least the ones that I was around. So I thought it might make sense to try to get a law degree. So I was at Berkeley getting my law degree, and it was around the surge of the Iraq War, and things were going terribly in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and in the war on terror. And it sort of occurred to me that, and I started thinking about it and writing about it a lot, that there was a real disconnect at the time between these wars that were being fought overseas, and the fact that most Americans weren't impacted at all by the wars. So in other words, less than 1% of Americans served in the wars. We weren't paying taxes. We weren't selling war bonds. People weren't impacted by that, and I thought, it just occurred to me that in a democracy, that's not a healthy thing. And so, after thinking about it and writing about it and talking about it long enough, I finally decided I needed to put my money where my mouth was, and decided to commission as an officer in the Navy, which was a phenomenal experience. I got to serve in Japan. Actually, my first major disaster wasn't COVID. I was part of the disaster relief effort after the tsunami and earthquake and nuclear disaster, the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, which is the largest military disaster relief effort in history. And then from there went and served in Guantanamo with the military commissions. And then when I came home from the military, I was really felt like if more people could have the experience like I had, I got to be around people of very different backgrounds, very different beliefs, and be part of that, having that experience of just focusing on a common mission, a common purpose, and the camaraderie that builds. If more people could have that, I think our country would be in a much different place. So I started thinking a lot about and working on national service. I'd mentioned an organization I was part of that Stanley McChrystal had started around national service. And then when I had the chance, as you had mentioned, to be elected official, I was the mayor of my hometown in Novato, California. I decided that we wanted to create a service program connected to our local college, Dominican University there, where we created a program that if you graduate from Novato High School and you commit to doing 2 summers of service with the city of Novato and you got into Dominican University, Dominican was going to give you a $100,000 scholarship. And that was an example, a way for me to use my position of leadership as mayor to say to our young people, we want you to serve, we need you to serve, and if you do, we're gonna find ways to help you pursue your dreams and your career. And fortunate enough to have a great partner in Dominican University and the president there, Manny Marcy, who's a wonderful leader, to really understand the need to serve and the need for young people to be given that opportunity. So you're right to say that the service has been sort of a part of my whole life, and I feel very, very blessed that Governor Newsom is as committed to this issue as he is, and has asked me to take on this role and think about how do we create a real culture of service that brings people together and unites people in California, and also solves our biggest challenges.
That's an amazing journey, and I hope there aren't any more natural disasters following you around anytime soon. If for someone who's listening and maybe just at the beginning of their coming out of college, or thinking about grad school, or just starting work, what's the first step towards service, that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I think that's actually what we're trying to create in California, is an opportunity for everyone to serve or volunteer at some capacity. And so I think about it as almost like a pyramid, where at the bottom of the pyramid is because it's the biggest part. You have people who can do a couple hours of volunteering on a weekend, and then at the top of the pyramid is people who have the ability to dedicate a year or maybe a career to service. And I think what we want is to provide the opportunity for, no matter where you are, if you're looking to give back a couple hours on a Saturday, or you're looking to spend a semester or a gap year right after college, or you're looking to spend an entire year doing something like an AmeriCorps program, we want to give you that opportunity. So I think my advice would be is think about what you'd like to commit to. I mean, are you looking for an opportunity that is short term, or are you willing to take on a long term opportunity? And then mostly think about what you're passionate about and what you want to be involved with. And if you want to, if the COVID experience has inspired you to join the public health field, then think about being a nurse as a service job. That's incredible, and obviously is saving people's lives every day now. Or think about going to public health school, or there's a lot of different ways that I think people can give back and pursue a career in service right now. So, but I would first and foremost think about what you're passionate about, and then find an opportunity and think about what you're willing and able to do. So, because not everyone can take a year off to do, and it's not a year off. So that's a wrong way of describing it. But not everyone can take a year to do an AmeriCorps program, and not everyone can or is willing to join the military for 4 years of active duty. And so what our message is that everyone can make a difference. It doesn't matter if you want to spend 4 years or a career, or you want to spend a weekend. And we need everyone. Everyone has value, and everyone can make a difference, no matter what time commitment or length you're able to do.
And I know everywhere is going to need thousands and thousands of census takers and thousands of tracers, public health tracers. So there's going to be a lot of good opportunities to serve your community in the very near future.
That's absolutely right. So the point is we need everyone, and I encourage people to go to californiansforall.ca.gov to find out ways they can sign up and join us, and then we'll connect you to opportunities in your community, and also find other ways, whether it's through AmeriCorps, which is an amazing program and opportunity for young people to give back to their community and learn important skills, or career in public service. There's lots of ways people can make a difference, and the point is that we need you, and we need each other. So we hope people take this time to continue to step up for each other. It's really important.
Well, thank you. Let me ask you one last question, which is, I know you have 3 young boys. Any advice for us parents who want our kids to have that sense of service?
That's a good question. Well, we'll see. I'm not sure if I'm going to succeed at that. But I think I enjoy talking to my children about why service matters, and how there's always people, no matter where you are, that are less fortunate and have less and need a helping hand. And I think actually I'm glad you asked the question about a parent, because you had asked earlier about how we can create a culture of service and what leaders can do to create a culture of service in our communities and in our state. And in the reality, it can't just be one governor calling on people to serve, or mayors, or elected officials. It needs to be everybody, and there's probably no more important role model that can set that expectation of service than a parent for their children. And if every parent expected their kids to serve in some way and in some capacity, we would live in a very special society. So that would be my advice.
Absolutely.
Hopefully I succeed at that as well.
Yeah. If we all expected it and then the kids actually listened to us, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. That's right.
Well, Josh, thank you for your service. It's a pleasure talking to you, and I know you have a million things to do and millions of Californians to get out and to help each other. And as a Californian, I appreciate your efforts.
That means a lot, Ryan. Look forward to working with you more closely. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to An Honorable Profession. Please subscribe to hear more amazing leaders. And keep asking your elected officials to be honorable. Boots Road Group produced this podcast. I'm Ryan Coonerty, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.